The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar on responsible appending. I'm Keith Reinhardt, the marketing manager here at FreshAddress, and I'm joined by my colleague Russ Travers, our product manager. Just a reminder that today's session is live. It's not a recording, so definitely expect a few mess ups and a couple laughs, hopefully not all on my expense. So just a few housekeeping notes. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with GoToWebinar, but you're going to be automatically muted today. We encourage you to ask questions at any time, and they may be shared with the group. Just another reminder that a copy of the presentation will be sent to you after. Again, and if you think of any questions after the fact, feel free to email Russ or myself. Our contact information is included at the end of this deck. Just a little bit about us, FreshAddress, for those of you who aren't acquainted. We're an email database services company. We were founded back in 1999, and we deliver services that help companies clean, maintain, and grow their email lists. There's just a sampling of some of our clients. And our services include email appending, which we'll be covering in great detail today, postal appending, email change of address, and our safe to send email validation service. So let's dive into today's agenda. First, we're going to take a look at the email appending process, take a look at how it works, and why it's an easy and cost-effective way for companies to boost sales. We'll also dive into why email appending gets a bad rap and why taking shortcuts is a really bad idea. Then we'll outline some tips for how to select a vendor and how to get the most out of your projects. And finally, we'll discuss two brands that leveraged email appending to overcome some major business challenges and generate a major ROI in the process. Now I'm going to pass it off to Russ for a look at how the appending process works.
All right, thanks, Keith. Hi, everybody. So we are going to start with the basics here and talk about email appending 101, which is going to start with what is email appending. Also known as e-appending. It's basically it's the process of taking your known customer data, matching it against a vendor's opt-in database, and you're obtaining, in order to obtain email addresses. So let's take a look at a more literal example. So let's say this is your database. Here's just a snippet of your database. Maybe you ship catalogs, or maybe you only have shipping info. For whatever reason, you don't have email addresses, but you do have first and last name, and you do have postal address. That's good news, because you can take this stuff and through the process of email appending, you find a vendor or responsible vendor that's going to email append for you. And for each of those people, you'll be able to find an email address that matches up based on these huge opt-in databases, multi-source partners, things like that. We'll get into all of that. But for now, just kind of the simple process. For Joe Smith, we got joesmith97@gmail.com. Cool, sounds like him. Sarah Watson, skate girl, maybe she likes skating. That one matches up. So this is kind of just how the process works. You're getting email addresses from name and postal. All right, let's talk about some of the benefits of this process. Why would you want to do this process? Well, I mean, the obvious one is you're increasing your audience. You're expanding your email database, which means more chances for ROI, better opportunities. You have a larger database. You're collecting more data. Always a good thing in marketing. Up next, it's a pretty fast process. It's actually from end to end. It's not bad. I know FreshAddress does ours, and that includes matching, hygiene, permission messaging, and results, 15 business days. And if you want to skip the messaging part, do auto, then it's a few hours. But for the most part, these processes are going to be done pretty quick. Loyalty and win back. This is a chance to get in touch with those customers that maybe you've only been doing direct mailing for, maybe you haven't really been marketing towards at all. So you want to be able to win back these customers, reintroduce your brand, establish some loyalty, get onto the email space, which is a more effective way of marketing, especially with, as generations come up, email becoming way more prominent than direct mail. At least speaking as a millennial. Eco-friendly, environmentally sound. So less direct mailing means you're using less paper, which means you're saving more trees, a little more email, less carbon footprint, and all that. That's actually, that's going to be a really good thing. And then in addition to that, you're saving costs on postage and things like that. So switching to email, more positive aspects of switching over. Another one, repeatable. It's a repeatable process. So our database is changing all the time, as are our partners' databases. People's email addresses are changing. People are changing their home addresses. Things are getting updated, expanded. So even if you match one of your files and say 30% of it got matched, take those 70% unmatched, keep those, because you're going to want to keep running those through, because like I said, those will change a lot, and we'll talk a little bit more about what kind of return you can get on repeating that process. One more benefit, your competitors are doing it. Your competitors are probably doing it already. If they're not, good, you can get a leg up this way, but it's just a way to keep up with the competition. You want to keep expanding that database. You want to keep emailing. You want to keep that marketing campaign strong, and keep putting yourself in front of customers, keep trying to win back deals, and increase your ROI. All right, we did the what and the why. How about deciding whether appending is right for you? So we got Bill Shakespeare helping us out here. To append or not to append. Here are some things just to qualify yourself to see if this is something you might want to pursue. Do you have name, company, postal addresses? So first name, last name, and postal is what we require for a consumer email append. Company is there because we do B2B as well, and other vendors will do B2B. Which means you'll have to have the company name as well. But first name, last name, postal, basically what you need for a consumer append. Is your list in the tens or hundreds of thousands? The way this works, it's kind of a numbers game. So the more records you can give, the more results you'll get. And most companies will have a tiered system like FreshAddress, where the more records you provide, the less you're paying per match. Have you established an ROI in the email channel? So maybe you're starting to realize that, wow, our email results are way higher than our direct mail results. We got to get everyone into this email campaign. That's a good time to take all those blank email spaces in your database and try to fill those with some effective addresses. Or maybe you're not doing email at all. Maybe you want to get into it, but you don't have you don't have a database of emails. Well, if you have a list of customers that maybe you've been shipping to, or that you've done business with before, this is a great time to flip them over into an email channel and reintroduce yourself from a different angle. Finally, are you asking everywhere for email addresses and just aren't getting enough of them? We're talking about point of sale, cash registers, web forms, trade shows, registering for your website, anything like that. You want to make sure that you're asking for those emails to improve on your database. If that's still not getting it done for you, check out email appending. We might be the match for you in terms of getting that email database a little bit bigger, a little bit better. And like I mentioned on that numbers game, I can say, like, at least from the FreshAddress perspective, we see like 15 to 35% of your list get matched on a consumer append, and more like 10 to 30% on B2B, which I'll get into a little bit, but just to kind of put some numbers to that second bullet point there. All right, so this next slide is something cool that a team internally here at FreshAddress worked on for a little while in trying to determine the value of an email address. So obviously, everyone's going to have a different perception of this, but you want to take into account, well, what percentage of your email addresses are converting? What percentage of those are buying? What percent? And then taking an average. We've seen tons of different companies use a lot of different formulas to figure this out, but basically we just pulled some of those values here across different industries just to kind of give you a sense of here's what other people in your industry are saying they think an email address is worth. So you can see these range from like $100 marketing agency up to $500 for telecom, up to $10,000 for healthcare, and these are real tangible values that people are attaching to email addresses. And they may be more than you think, but I think if you sit down and kind of actually determine this, you'll see that these emails can be worth more than you think. So my question to you is, how can you not afford to spend the 50 cents or less to acquire a 100% guaranteed deliverable address? We're just adding these numbers to your database. All of these vendors, that's what we're all doing. We're trying to add to your database so that you can reap the benefits of these emails and figure out the value of your own email, and you can kind of weigh that out on your own. But just to let you know, if you're ready for appending, take a look at some of those values. All right, finally here on the reasons why, that it's 2018, it's almost 2019. I've been to enough trade shows, marketing trade shows now, to know that data is all the rage in marketing right now. You want to collect as much data as you can on your customers in order to give them the best possible buying procedure, the best customization, the best personalization. All this data helps. And I would say that email is probably the biggest piece of that puzzle. So that's one thing. If you do have some holes in your database in that email column, you definitely want to plug those up with some real valid emails. So that's how this stuff can really benefit you and keep you modern, keep you up with the times in terms of marketing. All right, so that covers the what and the why. Let's talk about the how, the actual process of appending these emails, which I've touched up on a little bit. We're going to start with B2C. We're talking about consumer email addresses. So first thing, you have your existing customer postal database, and you send it in for processing. Now, the word customer is underlined there because it's very important that these are customer addresses, customer first name, last name, people that you've done business with. You can't append a prospect list. You're going to run into all sorts of can spam problems that way. You got to stick to the rules. You got to stay above board. You're only collecting emails of those people you've done business with already. So after you send in your database, send in your list, then the vendor is going to take that list and they're going to match based on their database, sometimes based on partners' databases. They'll do some multi-sourcing. Here at FreshAddress, we do some multi-sourcing with some carefully vetted and trusted partners in order to fill those gaps. Of course, all of our databases here are 100% opted in. Everyone in our database has consented to be contacted on marketing emails. That's very important. We'll get to how to choose vendors in a little bit, but of course, that is an aspect that you want to pay attention to. Up next, a really important one to us here at FreshAddress, suppressions are run. Those email addresses that are getting matched, those aren't valuable yet. You don't know what those are. Those could be more damaging than good to your email database. So you want to find a vendor who has this built in, a suppression system, so that you want someone that specializes in clean emails so that you can get rid of any malicious emails, any frequent complainers, typos, formatting errors, spam traps, bogus, role accounts, and more. You want all those out of those lists before you start sending to these new addresses in order to make sure that what you paid for it, you're actually getting some return on, and it's not actually hurting you. You know, you want to avoid any pingers in this space and make sure you go with a trusted hygiene solution. Next up, this step is a key step in the appending process, and this is where we also see a lot of things go wrong. A welcome email, very important. A permission email, it's also called. These get sent out to your appended emails, and either you can do this on your own or you can find a vendor that'll do it for you. It's a nice perk if you can find that. This welcome email is sent out and says, hey, you know us, you've done business with us. We want to start emailing you new offers, new deals, good stuff that you can click on and access via online. Do we have permission to do that? And then you give them a very easy decision, very clearly laid out, to say, yes, you can email me, or no, you don't have my permission. We'll talk about what to do with those results in a few slides, but this is a key part of the process. You don't want to miss this, because can spam, according to can spam, you don't have to do this. It's not illegal to email those people directly, but it's best practice, and if you're not doing it, then you're just getting yourself in loads of trouble. So it's strongly recommended, and I put strongly in bold and underlined. Finally, you get your file back to you. It's filled with email addresses. every email address you have, is successfully deliverable, isn't going to cause any problems in your database, and then we'll talk about how to implement those into your campaigns. All right, so B2B next. B2B is a little bit trickier because, of course, there's a lot more people moving companies than moving addresses, and there's a lot more people changing their company email addresses than their consumer email addresses. It's just the way the world works right now. So it's basically the same process. The only thing we introduce is this corporate domain pattern matching. And it's not something FreshAddress does internally, but it's something some of our partners will do who have these knowledge databases of corporate email patterns. They've seen enough emails come through from these corporations to know that, take FreshAddress, for example, my email is rtravers@freshAddress.com. First initial, last name at freshAddress.com. Same for Keith, kreinhardt@freshAddress.com. Once they have that pattern down, they can do some matching based on those patterns. Because, once again, it's already a customer. They've already done some business with you. So it's not some random guess at this person's email. No dictionary attacks, no random guessing, and especially no role accounts here. If you get a role account back, like an info@freshAddress.com, that's going to go to more than just one person. That's going to go to who knows how many people, and who knows how many of those people are going to hit the spam button on you because they don't know who you are. So you definitely want to avoid anything that's giving you back role accounts. You want to stay specific to a person. That's why B2B is, it's a little bit trickier, but it can be really effective finding those pattern matched emails. All right, that's going to do it for kind of the process, the what, the why, the how. I'm going to pass it back to Keith to kind of get into some of the dangers of appending and why it might have a bad name around your office.
Thanks, Russ. All right, so let's take a look at why email appending can be dangerous and what makes it such a taboo topic. So one big problem for marketers is simply that there's so many vendors to choose from that it's hard to select the right one. So as we see here, who offers email appending services? A quick Google search yields all these vendors and many, many more. And like I said, the list of providers is endless, and it ranges from some well-known data giants to some one-man operations that are operating out of somebody's garage, pretty much. And as Russ will mention in a moment, you need to make a really calculated decision about who you choose to work with and who you choose to trust with your data. So you really need to stop and consider the real cost that extends way beyond the price tag. Also, it's important to consider that if the service is cheap or nearly free, it's very possible that your data is the product. And you choose the wrong vendor here, it could bring down your entire email marketing program. And another important thing to consider is that not only are you opening yourself up to all kinds of deliverability issues and other problems, you'll be sharing some customer data with this vendor. So you need to really trust that your new partner will do the right thing with it. And again, you just really need to do your homework here and choose a vendor wisely. So we're in an interesting position as a vendor of email appending services and an email hygiene provider. And all too often we encounter companies that ran an appending project, they cut a couple corners and ran into big time trouble. And the story usually goes like this, and we've seen it time and time again. This is the anatomy of a bad append and a typical story that we hear. So the marketer goes shopping for appending solutions, ends up going with the cheapest option. They contract out, they run a project, the appending vendor gives them back some low quality data, hasn't been properly matched, cleansed, or confirmed. You can kind of see where this is going. They start to message their new appended addresses, the spam complaints pile up, they hit some spam traps, their ESP becomes furious, they end up getting blocked and blacklisted, sometimes for weeks, sometimes even months. As we embark upon the holiday season now, it just doesn't sound good any time of the year, especially now. We've seen it happen time and time again. And then the net really is that the company loses money. Somebody, usually the marketer that went with the low-cost option, gets disciplined or fired. And then from there, the internal policies change, and appending becomes essentially a curse word for the future. And then we see that happen again, time and time again. So as I mentioned, as a hygiene vendor, we're often tasked with kind of cleaning up the mess, so to speak, from a botched append job. Again, happens all the time. So we've outlined just a couple of sad stories, a couple of cases of clients that came to us who ran an append project that cut some corners, ran into some deliverability issues, and then needed us to clean up the mess. So this is company one. This project was about, I think, provided about 200,000 appended records. So as you can see here, roughly 10% of them were invalid accounts right off the bat. There's some spam traps in there. There's some real obvious formatting, syntax errors that could be caught with just a simple manual review, some duplicate addresses. So that's just no good. We have another example here. I'm not sure what the number of appended records was, but you see here there's over 1,000 or 1,000 confirmed spam trap addresses in this file. So essentially they paid at least a few $100s for 1,000 spam traps. I mean, I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. It just doesn't seem like a good deal, especially when you combine it with some of the other junk we found in their list. Now I'm going to pass it back to Russ to take a look at how to select an email appending vendor.
All right, thank you, Keith. All right, so looking at all those dangers that Keith mentioned, and like I said, it may have a bad reputation around your workplace. You may think, oh, so this has some benefits to it, but it's a really high-risk process. And I will say it's high risk unless you know you're going with a respected vendor on this one. If you go with the wrong vendor, then you're talking about risk. But if you do it the right way, you follow this checklist, you're going to be just fine. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to assemble a checklist here to go through if you are planning on appending and you're going through different vendors and you're trying to figure out what's the right match for you. Feel free to use this checklist. But before we even get to number one, trust your gut on these. Must pass the sniff test and walk away if anything seems fishy. This is, like Keith mentioned, there are some risks to this. You don't want to go with anyone you don't feel 100% comfortable with. This is your data. These are your customers. You want to put yourself in their shoes and make sure that you're treating that data as valuable as you should be, and that you're really taking care of that data and you're going with vendors that you trust. So if anything weird pops out, just walk away. All right, let's look at these. Number one, here's an easy way you can determine the sniff test that I touched upon in those first few slides. Ask them if they'll append a prospect list for you. If they say yes, they're done. You can't go with them. That's against canned spam. They're going to give you emails that are just going to be a giant headache. We get calls all the time, people asking us to append prospect lists. We have the same answer every time. We don't do that. We only do customer lists. You have to, when you're appending, you have to go with someone that actually knows you so that you can reintroduce yourself into the relationship. Number two, you want a vendor who matches against 100% opted-in data. You may know your data. You know that your data is spoken for. You know you got it in legitimate ways. But what about your vendor? Are they guaranteeing that their entire database is people who have opted in to receiving marketing emails from people? One way that you can kind of determine this, if they're 100% opted in, make sure that move on to number three, runs all matches through a proven email validation and hygiene solution. This is one of FreshAddress's specialties. You want to make sure that these is not just a pinger. Keith showed a bunch of the other vendors in the space. It's a lot of generalized solutions. It's a lot of people that offer a lot of different things, and email is only a small sliver of that selection. So you want to make sure you're going with someone where email is their specialty and that they have a proven email validation and hygiene solution. You don't want to go with the pingers on this. Some of the pingers will check email deliverability by just going to that email address on the back end, knocking on the door. As long as someone's on the other side, they say, okay, this is deliverable email. But by doing that, they're missing out on the role accounts, on the frequent spam complainers, and especially on spam tracks. So for this, you definitely want to make sure you go with an expert, or you don't even know what you're paying for. All right, next on the list, number 4. Like I said, it's a good perk if you can get someone who can send the confirmation messaging for you. These are these initial messages that you send out to get permission. Say, oh, is it okay if we start emailing you? You know us. We've been direct mailing you maybe. So this is a good way to make sure you get the experts on your side, especially if it's your first time doing one of these. You want to make sure that they're helping you out with these permission messaging, because this is where it can get a little bit tricky. This is when you're 90% of the way there. All you got to do is handle this part and make sure your customer feels like you're respecting them in this process. This is where a lot of things can go haywire if you don't do this the right way. I mentioned that CAN-SPAM says you don't have to do this if you're really following that law, but it's a low bar to clear. So you want to clear that with flying colors. You want to go up and above and beyond and show your customer that, hey, I respect your preferences. Do you want to get emails from us, yes or no? Number 5, are they providing the preferred address? So of course everyone's got those old emails, your old AOL account, your old Yahoo account that's just getting pummeled with marketing emails every day probably, but you never check it. So you want to make sure as best you can that these are the preferred addresses, that these look like addresses that are checked off, and that you're getting a good word that you can trust from your vendor that these are going to be addresses where there are active people on the other side. Maybe they have some click data, maybe some ESP data that they can share with you to make sure you're getting a preferred address. 100% deliverability guarantee. This is kind of the big test, right? This is, can they put their money where their mouth is? They're giving you what they say are deliverable email addresses. Will they stand behind them? If you send out an email the next day that you got from one of your vendors and it bounces, are they going to honor that? Are they going to refund you? Are they going to give you a bounce credit? Anything like that? This is another perk, but with this checklist, if you can nail all 7 of these, you're going to be happy with your Append. Which brings us to finally number 7, do they have a stellar reputation? We're talking about testimonials, we're talking about recognizable brands, case studies, references, anything you can get. Look at reviews online. Do they have a credible client portfolio? All of these things should factor into your decision. Like we said, it can be risky to do this if you're going with the wrong vendor. You want to be really confident in a vendor that knows their stuff, a vendor that's done this before with big companies and they're trusted and reputable businesses. All right, so now you have that checklist to work off of. You've selected your vendor. Maybe you've processed your list. Well, what do you do next? Hopefully you have a vendor that'll help you out with this part. But here are some helpful tips anyways that you can keep in mind. Let's go back to our database from those first couple of slides. This is a B2B. Say we have company in there, now it's B2B. Eyeball the results first when you get your results back. You just take a look at them, more for peace of mind than anything, but it's always a good idea. Even if you got thousands of match results, that's fine. Pick out a few, pick out 100, pick out 30, whatever you want to look at. Just give them the eyeball test. Let's look at these. Joe Smith, Mary Maids. The email is info@Mary Maids. It's a role account. Joe Smith might be at the end of that email address, but so might 4 other people, and 3 of them might hit the spam button. This is not a good email you should be sending to. Sarah Watson at Prism Design. Looks like they returned the email Tom Jones at Prism Design. Looks like they got the company right, but the name wrong. So this is not going to go to Sarah Watson either. These are the types of things that should just raise a red flag when you're looking through the results. Ken Chapman has hotgirl29@AOL.com. I'm guessing this is not Ken Chapman's business email address. So that's another one that, obviously raises a red flag. And then you want to watch out for these title email addresses too. They're similar to role accounts. Webmaster@T-Squad. Do we know if Austin Jordan is still the webmaster at Techno Squad? We don't, but that email address could be in use by somebody else, somebody that doesn't know you and doesn't want to receive a marketing email from you. So first thing to do check out those results, give them a good look over, and make sure that everything at least looks good from, a high level. Next thing you want to do is rebuild these relationships. Like I said, these could be direct mail clients that you're trying to contact through email. They could be clients that you've never tried to email before. It could be clients that bought something and you never collected an email address. Maybe your cash register was down at the time and you have first name, last name, and postal. You're getting these emails. You want to rebuild that relationship. You want to say, hey, do you remember us? That's why you never want to go back too far on some of these in terms of customer data. But you want to make sure they remember you and they're willing to do more business with you, this time via email. So usually when you get your results from one of these appends, if the vendor is doing the permission messaging for you, they've already sent out the permission message that says, do you want to join? Do you want to get emails from us? Now, you'll also get result files from your vendor. One of the opt-ins, the people that said, yes, we'll receive some email. The opt-outs, the people that said no. And then the biggest group will probably be the non-responders. So first of all, the opt-outs, that's the easy one. Take them out. They opted out. CAN-SPAM says you can't email them, so that's fine. Take them out of your workflow. That's an easy one. The opt-ins, sometimes you can put them right into your workflow, because these are people who know you, trust you, said they want emails from you. Sometimes you can drop those right in. You also might want to create a separate workflow just so you're not slamming them with emails right away. Maybe you want to create a separate workflow that kind of trickles them in. The biggest group is these non-responders, the people who got that permission message and never answered. You can still email these people, but you don't want to drop them into your regular workflow. You want to create a separate workflow for these people. And this is, again, where it helps to have experience on your side. You should be able to use project managers, account managers, whoever you worked with at the vendor company will be able to help you to know the best way to work these non-responders into your email campaigns. And eventually, some of them might say nope, some of them might opt out. Good, you take them out. Some of them might opt in. You can put them back in. You just got to work your way through that process. You probably will get some spam complaints from this. That's just part of it. That's to be expected. That's, being realistic about things. But if you follow these rules, you'll definitely be in good shape in terms of staying above board on all of this stuff. Like I mentioned, you might be reintroducing your company to someone who doesn't remember ever doing business with you. So these messaging, just once again to reiterate, you want the experts on your side, you want experience on your side, you want people who've seen it all. One more thing, authentication procedures. So this is when, so you shouldn't take whatever appended email results you get, don't take that to be proof of identity. So what I mean is, don't use these email addresses as like usernames, don't use them as like confirmation of an identity until the customer has actually given you that email address. It sounds like common sense. We've seen it happen. So definitely still make them sign up with their own email address. Make them give you that email address before you just assume this is that person. We're going to send the receipt to them, anything like that. So authentication procedures, one more thing to keep an eye on in these append processes. You never want to overwrite anything you have with these append emails unless you have confirmed that it's the client email address. All right, last thing here, and something that I have mentioned, you want to run these quarterly. You can rematch those unmatched records on a quarterly basis. Like I said, databases are changing. People are changing companies, changing addresses, things. Maybe we have a new multi-source partner. There's all sorts of different things that can change the results in that unmatched file. So you want to keep that unmatched file and be ready to submit that when you need another boost to emails. We've actually seen that clients can double the results over their first year of resubmitting on a quarterly basis. So it's just another way to make sure that you're always adding to that database and using Append the right way. All right, so I'm a product guy, I'm not a sales guy, but I'm proud of our services here at FreshAddress. So allow me one slide to tell you about the FreshAddress difference when it comes to appending. After I've given you that great checklist, We want to make sure that we check all the boxes. Proprietary opt-in database, yes, we have a database of almost 900 million emails. It's all opted in. Everyone has consented to receive marketing contact. And we do the same with our partners. We carefully selected our partners. We carefully vetted them. We know they're above board just like us. Multi-source matching, that's what I'm talking about. Partners, we use our partners to make sure that we get the highest match rate possible from trusted sources in order to return to you. Of course, my favorite one, Safe to Send technology. We've got Safe to Send. Nobody else has Safe to Send. Been around for 20 years now. It's the best hygiene in the business. We're going to give you, we're going to detect all your spam traps, all those malicious, problematic emails. We're getting those out of there, and we are returning to you 100% guaranteed deliverable emails. Guaranteed deliverable because we do put our money where our mouth is. If your email bounces, if one of the emails we gave you bounces, you come back to us, you get a bounce credit. Dedicated project managers. Again, going back to that 20-year history, we've been doing appending for almost that long. We have people who know appending inside and out, who have seen all these sad stories and all these success stories. They're here, they want to help you out, they want to get you the ROI that you deserve on these append projects. So it's good to have the experience on your side. It's good to trust the experts. And we do have dedicated project managers for each job and each client. And then finally, we've been audited, we're secure, we're compliant, we're CAN-SPAM compliant. We have all of that at the top of our heads at all times. We all know the laws. We adhere to the highest standards. We care a lot about our reputation on that side. And actually, another little tip, if you're shopping vendors, is to see if you can email them a file of emails. This is something that we don't accept and no one should accept. Email is too susceptible to data leaks and hacks. All of our files are accepted via our client portal or a secure FTP. That's just another little hack you can do when you're checking on different vendors to see where your data is secure. Keep in mind, it's your data, it's worth a lot. And so that is really the FreshAddress difference in terms of appending. We're the experts, and we kind of know what I'm doing. Thanks for listening to that little salesy pitch. And now, back to Keith.
Thanks a lot, Russ. All right, so let's take a look at some success stories. Particularly two organizations that we feel really have got email appending right. The first up is the American National Red Cross. This is a pretty interesting situation. The client was actually having trouble getting folks who scheduled appointments via telephone to show up for their blood donations. And another issue they had is they realized that the folks that scheduled online are about 2 times more likely to show up for their appointment. But unfortunately, they lacked working email addresses for over, I think, 1 million or so donors. So this was resulting in some pretty serious problems. They weren't making their donation goals for the year. Overhead costs were higher than they needed to be. They were paying for folks on the phone to schedule. They're renting facilities and paying for the personnel to show up. And they were wasting money essentially. So they tapped into FreshAddress. We helped them add 1 million donor email addresses to their database. In very short order, that helped them triple digital signups, which were those folks that were much more likely to show up. In effect, that also helped them improve donor retention and drove down operating costs. So that's a big, successful project that led to a longer-term relationship. Another success story is partnership with Native Americans. So these guys had actually been building their database since way before the internet was really a thing, which was great for them up until the point where fundraising costs started to get slashed, and they really felt that pinch and need to move towards email and away from direct mail and telemarketing. So over time, we've helped them reconnect with about 500,000 constituents and members. The ROI and the business results here pretty much speak for themselves. They've reported a 4,000% or better return on their investment. Appended emails have generated over $2 million in value, and I think right now we're up around 1/3 of their online revenues are coming from appended email addresses. So again, these are just 2 success stories. We have case studies and some information on many other vertical markets, but these are two of the most impactful, I felt. And that's going to do it for today's session. As we mentioned, we'll take some questions now. If you have questions later on after the fact, my email address is here, so is Russ's. If you want to learn more about FreshAddress, you can visit our website, check out our blog, subscribe to our monthly newsletter. You can also follow us on social media. So we have a question about how much an email address is worth. And if I'm looking at this question and understanding it correctly, so we've undergone a big project that partially tries to figure the ROI in some of our projects, partially just tries to figure out the nuts and bolts behind the calculations that our clients use to calculate the value of an email address. So those are self-reported numbers from clients. They're just anonymized. So that's just the vertical market that those companies play in. I think we've had hundreds of responses to date, but those are just anonymized reported numbers from clients. And I think sometime in the pretty near future, we'll start to publish some averages for vertical markets, which we'll share in a blog post and most likely a webinar. I think that's it for questions for right now. Again, feel free to email Russ or myself with any questions that you might have after the fact. And if you enjoyed today's webinar, join us on November 29th. We'll have a session with one of our direct marketing partners, Jay Schmid. It's entitled Clean Data and Killer Creative. And the purpose of that webinar will be to teach you how to leverage your existing email and creative resources to build bigger and more profitable campaigns. And that's going to do it for today's webinar. We thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.